Welcome, Legionnaires, to the Long Live the Legion podcast, where we talk about the Legion of Superheroes comic book team and break subjects down so that whether you're just out of the Legion Academy or you're a longtime veteran, you get to know the team a little bit better. I'm your co-host, Jim.
I'm your other co-host, Jay.
And welcome to episode 7. What do we have on the mission monitor board for today, Jay?
Today is the spotlight on Cosmic Boy. So we're going to talk about the first Legion leader, the person who a lot of people consider the soul of the Legion, and the character who, if you want to use the metaphor for magnetism as Jeff Johns did, he's the person who pulls everybody together and makes the team work.
Awesome. So who is Cosmic Boy?
Cosmic Boy is Rokk Krinn, which I actually think is in the top 10 list of best names of the Legion of Superheroes.
For sure.
I love the fact that it's Rokk Krinn, and it's a pun, but it works. He is from the planet Brawl, and on Brawl, everybody has magnetic powers, which means that they can control anything that has iron in it, and they can move it around, and and in some cases, that's actually how they move through their world. They can control all these different things. Rokk is also, I believe, canonically, one of the best or most powerful people from Brawl as far as his magnetic powers, as shown by his immense skill with the game Magnoball, which I still sometimes don't quite get, but I think the basic idea is it's handball, but with with metal balls.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I've seen Magnoball portrayed as everything from something like the old game of Triad, if you remember from Battlestar Galactica, to something as big as like American football, where you have a big old pitch and you get to move balls back and forth across the field. So, not sure. I think we could probably do an episode on Magnoball, but I don't think anybody really wants that. So. But
you say that, and then wait, there's gonna be like 10 emails of people going, no,
right.
We want a Magnoball.
Right.
So I think it could be fun. So aside from that background on Brawl, a couple of the really important points that have always been part of Rokk's background is he might be the Legionnaire whose family is the biggest focus in Legion stories. They've always talked about his mom, his dad, his younger brother, Paul. And actually in the Silver Age, because we talked about this last time, he's frequently shown still living with his parents. Like, they've been a part of his life for most of his run. And actually his brother Paul would end up, I don't want to say replacing, but taking his place in the Legion as Magnetic Kid at the end of the Bronze Age Legion, or at the end of Volume 3. When he came to Earth, canonically, he came looking for a job because his parents were broke. So whether it's he just needed to work or he was going to play professional Magnoball, and we're going to say Magnoball a lot this episode, aren't we? He's on the cruiser. He meets Lightning Lad. They end up kind of meeting Saturn Girl, but not really. She calls for help, and then he and Lightning Lad rush in. They save RJ Brand, and that's how he becomes a member of the Legion of Superheroes.
Yep. Although there is one correction I will make. So, and this is something that I discovered from reading the Cosmic Boy miniseries from the mid-'80s. So that's something we'll talk about in a little bit more detail as we go through the episode here. But according to that miniseries, he was actually born on Earth. So his parents came to Earth from Brawl. He was born on Earth. They moved back to Brawl. And that's where, I guess, he grew up and all that good stuff. And then he ends up coming back to Earth in this whole scenario. And the interesting thing about this, at least from the Cosmic Boy mini-series perspective, is that he came back as part of that initial trip where he meets Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad at the age of 14. And in on Brawl, the age of 14 is considered the age of majority. So he's kind of a legal adult at that point. And so that's why he's coming back to make money for his family. Because they were considered, I guess, lower class as we would consider it. And that's where his life changes, because he helps become a founder of the Legion of Superheroes at this point.
And then he gets the, let's say, title. Yeah. So respect. They pick him as the first leader. So he's the first leader in Legion history, and he was picked by a computer. Not too sure how a computer was able to look at three 14-year-olds and decide who would be the best, but he ends up in that role. And I think in almost every version of the Legion, no matter which reboot you're talking about, he's always the first leader of the Legion. Like he's seen as the person who's who's the best person for the job.
Yeah, no, but that's right. You're exactly right. In every, I think every version, he is the initial leader, whether it's picked by computer or somebody says, "Hey, you're the best person for the job," or he just kind of falls into the role. He is canonically the first person with the job, and in some cases, they do a better job than others in why that is the case. Sometimes it's just because he's the leader because we said so. In other versions, they add a good bit from the story to say this is why he's the leader. So he comports himself in a very charismatic style to be a natural leader on the page, and so it looks like he actually is a good leader. He knows what he's supposed to be doing. In many others, he kind of is the leader, but he doesn't really behave like a natural leader, which is kind of an interesting scenario in those particular cases. And we have 3 or 4 different versions of the Legion with which to to actually compare all these different things.
The one other thing that he is, and I think this is true in every iteration, he's the history buff
Yes.
of the Legion. He's the character who knows everybody from the 20th century. So his job is either to be the exposition character. So he's the one who comes in. Like I think of when they went up against Ra's al Ghul, and he's the one. This is who this is, and this is what this character is, and this is why he's a bad guy. And everyone else is like, who are you talking about? So his job is to be the person to give context and to explain to the reader essentially what's going on.
And as we talk about some of the character's best moments, the Cosmic Boy greatest hits album, if you will. One really good place to start is the Cosmic Boy miniseries. So what happened in the mid 80s, this is just after the Crisis on Infinite Earths, sorry. They published a miniseries called Legends, and the whole concept of the Legends storyline was that it kind of went in and out of it was its own miniseries, but it had various tie-ins across various other different stories as well. And it was really a character study about what makes the DC superhero community legends, as the name implies. And the whole thing was basically Darkseid coming through and using his minions to tear down the structure of these heroes, to kind of show society in a bad way and looking negatively at their heroes in a lot of ways. And we're recording this in 2025. It's uncannily resonant with some of the things that are going on politically in our world today. And this is written in 1985, so it just tells you how some things just never change. And you have scenarios where the people are being easily deceived by charismatic folks who say horrible things, and the world generally turns against the heroes. Against this backdrop, Cosmic Boy with his girlfriend Night Girl come into the past for a vacation because he's, like Jay, you just said, Cosmic Boy is a history buff. So for their vacation, they wanted to go into the mid 20th century Earth and hang out and see everything and all that kind of stuff. And then quickly they discover that something is very, very wrong because Superman does not recognize him. Nothing is going according to what he remembers history as being said, and they're at a quandary. They're trying to understand what's happened. How do we fix this? And so the end result is that becomes a kind of an epic confrontation with the Time Trapper, which is one of the Legion's oldest foes, which we probably need to have an episode just for him itself. Or it, as it probably should be said. And it's a great story. So this is something that's a 4-issue miniseries. I highly recommend it. You don't necessarily have to read the Legends tie-ins. It helps to understand what's happening around the story, but you don't absolutely have to. But it's really interesting. It turns into a story where at one point Rokk actually meets an ancestor of his with the last name Krinsky, and who was a NASA scientist, and the whole thing is the mission that would lead to the eventual colonization of the stars gets messed up. And it turns out that Rock's ancestor had a direct hand in this. So Cosmic Boy kind of saves the day, saves the technology from being completely destroyed. And so eventually mankind can go to the stars. And so the Legion can actually happen. But as they find out, things are kind of askew. So definitely a great story to really understand his character and what drives him. So mainly the love of history, his relationship at the time with Lyta Jath, who is Night Girl, is something that very core to him at the time, and it's a very core story because like I said before, it also features the Time Trapper and how he is so integral to Legion lore. So very very crucial to the whole piece of the puzzle with regards to Cosmic Boy.
It sounds to me that we should do an entire episode on the Cosmic Boy miniseries so we can get in depth into that.
Maybe we should do that sooner than later.
I think we should. So I think that's probably the best next episode we can do. We're going to talk about Cosmic Boy. So as much as we can talk about this miniseries for another 20 minutes, let's hold off. And that way, listeners, you have something to come back to, because you talk about how important this series is. Well, let me just add one more layer to this just for the next episode. This was the first attempt really for them to square what was going on in DC regular continuity with no more Superboy and all of this stuff and all of these changes. And here's the Legion creative team trying to figure everything out. So there's tons of stuff to talk about. And it really sort of goes to show why Cosmic Boy is so important to everything that's going on in the Legion. Why, I mean, he's a critical member of the team. He's there in everywhere that we look at. So that's a good one. The other story I was going to go with, or if you want to get a sense of Cosmic Boy and how he's written and what his character is, it's Legion of Superheroes Volume 2, number 297. So to set a background, this is post Great Darkness. The Legion has defeated Darkseid. And then in a storyline that really is a very 80s idea, but it still sort of translates today, terrorists set off a nuclear bomb in Metropolis, and Rokk Krinn's family is caught in that explosion. So they're in the hospital. His mother actually ends up dying, and he decides he's going to go get vengeance and he's going to get these terrorists. So it's an entire issue that's just focused on him and focused on what kind of character he is, what kind of person he is. Now, this is true 80s. So like nowadays we would say, hey, your mom just died. Therapy is a good idea, or go talk to somebody and maybe get some help. In the 80s, it's you're fine. Just bottle all your feelings up and keep them inside yourself. But the big sort of takeaway is he has the power to do whatever he wants. And when they're showing his power at its ultimate level, because it's not just him being a superhero, it's him avenging his mother. So there's a few moments of this where he uses his powers in very dark ways. I don't know if you remember this one, Jim. He actually takes the metal in the blood of the terrorists and starts essentially moving it around or shaking it up. So he's torturing these people. And then he gets his control back, and he realizes who he is, and he realizes that what he's doing is not what a hero does, or not what his mother would want. It's a very, very emotional story, and it really hits because everybody can relate to it. Like, yeah, you just lost a parent. How do you handle that?
Yeah. And his mother's name is not Martha. So let's just make sure we get that out of the way right now.
Yeah, sadly, there's no scenes of Martha.
Why did you say that name?
That's another.
Why did I say that name?
I'll get in trouble if I make any Man of Steel jokes or any of those jokes. So I'll leave that. What else would you say is a really good Cosmic Boy story that people should check out?
Well, I'm trying to think. So I was going through a bunch of different stories as we were preparing for this. I was also read the Legionaries 3 miniseries, which happens at around this similar time here. That's actually more of a Lightning Lad story, honestly, and Saturn Girl story, because that story really revolves around the two of them and their kidnapped son. And Kaz is very important in this, but he's I think more of a side character as far as the central drama for this. Another one that popped up on my list, as far as the pre-Zero Hour Cosmic Boy was concerned, is the end of the Baxter run in the Magic Wars, where his brother Paul actually sacrifices himself for the Legion. It's there are some weird choices about that particular story and Paul's particular choice that don't sit really well with me, but the fact that it happens and Cosmic Boy obviously does not react to it well at all is another crucial piece of this from his character, and I think this also comes into play as you get into the 5 years later time frame as well.
Yeah, like 5 years later, and Keith Giffen has said this, like, Cosmic Boy is one of his favorite characters. He put Cosmic Boy at the center of 5 years later. I'd say Cosmic Boy might be the best written character in 5 years later for the way they handle it, because it's Brawl and Imps went to war. Cosmic Boy lost all of his powers. He's now married. And then for a lot of the storyline, Night Girl's pregnant. So it's the fear of, like, I'm going to become a father, especially with all the chaos that's going on. He's the character that really pulls the Legion together. And there's a very telling moment when it's really weird talking about 5 years later, is that I don't want to use the superhero names. I want to use their regular names, if that makes any sense. So Reap Daggle, so Chameleon Boy, is pulling everything together and reforming the Legion. And in his mind, the first choice is Rokk Krinn, even though he doesn't have any superpowers. He's just a regular person, because he knows that Rokk is the center of the Legion, is the soul. I would say this, like, if you want to really understand Rokk Krinn, especially original continuity, first 12 issues of 5 years later really get you a sense of who he is and why he's such a great character. And one of his best moments is when he meets Shrinking Violet, when he meets Salu for the first time, because they were at war with each other. And she is so afraid because she knows that, like, her planet destroyed, essentially, was killing thousands of his countrymen, aliens. So she's petrified, and he is so kind, so generous. He's like, no, I don't blame you at all. This wasn't your choice. And it shows who he is. It shows how good of a character he is. And it's a really emotional, really deep moment that they hit.
And that is probably, especially that first chunk of issues, is absolutely probably the emotional high point, at least for me, in that whole 5 years later run, just because it's so crucial to both of their characters. And then in I think it's issue 20 of 5 years later, they actually get into specifically what happened. And it's, it's just as important, just as emotional, I think, with regards to both characters, honestly, both Cosmic Boy and Shrinking Violet. And they're both very key characters in that whole run.
I agree. Like, and I would argue that they're probably the two best written. Like, they handle those two the best of what's going on. You can tell there's a lot of love for both characters from the creative team.
Yeah, and something that I was thinking about too, that I hadn't thought about prior to us talking here right now, around Cosmic Boy, around the 5 years later storyline, if we want to even call it that by the time we get to this point, but at the end of an era, right, it is, but is not a crucial point in Cosmic Boy's history, because it's a decision that's made that doesn't really stick from an overall 70 years of Legion history perspective, but it is one that is very memorable. And that is that when it comes to the end of an era storyline, Cosmic Boy, spoilers here everybody, is the time trapper. He becomes the time trapper, and he's the one that it turns out is messing with all of these timelines and causing all this to happen, the whole timeline reset. I know there's a lot of controversy around this decision. For me, within the context of that story, I think it worked fine. But I know some people weren't didn't have the best reaction to that, as well as with the whole end of that era of the Legion altogether. What did you think about that storyline?
I knew we were going to talk about this, and I spent a little bit of time actually kind of thinking about Cosmic Boy as Time Trapper. It makes sense on a lot of different levels. If you think about his love of history and you think about his understanding of the Legion's place in the universe, but I mean, nobody's happy to see one of your favorite characters become the villain,
Right.
right? Like that's always going to be a controversial choice. I mean, look, I really didn't like the way they ended all of this. Like I could go on for hours about every mistake, but I think they were stuck with we have 6 issues and we have to somehow try to wrap up at this point in time 30 years of continuity in a way that makes sense. And of all the choices that they made, I thought this was actually one that worked well. So I didn't have a problem with it, but I could understand why people would hate it.
Yeah, I just think at the end of the day, I think it was a well-told story. Where it gets a little bit weird for me is that in the previous iterations of the Time Trapper, when you talk about Legionnaires 3, when you talk about lots of other stories, the Time Trapper is just kind of a mean old bastard. And the way that he's shown in End of an Era isn't really that much of a mean old bastard kind of guy. He's just this kind of this well, the Time Trapper is basically designed to be entropy personified, right? And he comes across as that very well, but not very bitter, I didn't think. So it took a little bit of the sting out of the villain, but it still, like, it's narratively, it still worked for me.
I mean, you think of the other sort of classic Time Trapper stories, and then you try to connect it to, oh, this was actually Cosmic Boy. I mean, kind of misses on that level,
Yeah.
but I think so instead they just tried to make it as like, well, no, he's trying to keep the universe safe by controlling, and he's lost his moral base because he spent, I don't know how many thousands of years in that,
Yeah.
in the mystical library where he learned everything that he needed. I mean, I just thought it was one of those where I think they wanted to tie everything together before they wrapped it all up. And
For sure.
it wasn't a bullseye by any stretch, but I don't think they missed the target. It's like anything, right? Like whenever you reveal a character, whenever you have this big surprise, and then you think back to what that character did before when it was just a villain and it kind of becomes hard to accept. You go, well, no, there's no way the Cosmic Boy would have, like, for example, randomly killed thousands of people.
For sure. Yeah.
But the writers were stuck with this. We're trying to tie everything together to make it make sense.
But I think that where it does work, and this is where when you start looking at different versions of the Legion and how the Time Trapper is then used kind of moving forward, the Time Trapper could literally be anybody at any moment, which is, I think, kind of an interesting way of approaching it. So in that way, it kind of works. But so that's why I think I'm a little bit more forgiving from having all of this time of very, very different stories across all the years, where he's in these different kind of personas or different even personalities, right? So if you take the Time Trapper as somebody who can literally be a different person under the hood from one issue to the next, kind of makes it an interesting way of looking at it, I think.
And they did open up a gigantic door on this too during the Great Darkness saga, when there was sort of another Time Trapper who got revealed, and then Darkseid pulled all of his powers out, and then it was revealed that wasn't the real Time Trapper, but it was somebody else. Yep. So I mean, look, Legion continuity can get confusing even when it's straightforward.
Yep.
So that's why I wasn't too upset. I mean, like I said, like I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was good. I thought of all the Legionnaires, that was the most, like, that was the character that would work for. Like, if it had been revealed to be, I don't know, like Ultra Boy, I would have been like, well, that doesn't make sense. That's dumb. But
right.
And no criticism against Ultra Boy. It just doesn't match the character.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So after 5 years later, we get the reboot. We get a new Rokk. We get a new.
Yep.
We get into post Zero Hour. What would be your thought of Cosmic Boy in the post Zero Hour post Zero Hour
So
continuity.
this is exactly where I wanted to go next. So this is perfect. So when we get into the new reboot, right, we've talked about this, and they effectively do the whole retelling of the origin story. The difference here is that in the reboot, post Zero Hour, Cosmic Boy is already a Magna Ball champion at 14. That's his main claim to fame. So he's this very famous celebrity on Brawl. He's a sports champ. He's kind of a jock, but he's like the cool jock, right? He's the kind that can get along with everybody. So he has these natural leadership instincts already built into him from the jump because he's this team player on a Magna Ball team. And as such, when the Legion does get formed, he kind of is de facto leader because he knows how to actually lead a team. He's done it before. Then, as time goes on, just a few months into the post Zero Hour reboot, and they start adding the other Legionnaire characters into the mix, Leviathan, who is the reboot Colossal Boy, is picked by the UP to be the actual leader of the Legion because he is former science police. He has, technically, sanctioned training on leadership and how to run things from a paramilitary perspective and all that. And so he's appointed leader. And then just as that happens, they go on a mission and they lose a member who dies at the hands of the creature Tangleweb. And this creates this kind of crisis in ability for Leviathan, for Jim Allen, and he's doesn't know. He has a lot of self-doubt at this point. And who does he turn to for advice? But Rokk Krinn, who is somebody who is a natural leader. And so between the first episode or the first story of Tangleweb and the last, because they encounter him twice over the course of a year, Cosmic Boy has a lot of good instinctual leadership capabilities of nurturing his teammates, leading from behind, the kind of things that you really would expect to see from a leader that is an effective leader. And so that is where I think that whole first year of the Legion of Superheroes in the post Zero Hour era, which jumped between both the Legion of Superheroes title and the Legionnaires title, was a really good showcase for the best that Cosmic Boy could be as a leader. I think, from my experience, that is one of the best actual studies of him as a leader, as an effective leader, that really worked. So I don't know how you felt about that particular era.
Well, I agree. I always hate when they tell you somebody's good at something, but they don't show you somebody's good at something. Yeah. And they showed it. Like and I agree, that first year cemented this is the guy who should be running the show, and this is the guy who gets the best out of the team, and he understands what's going on. And I thought it was really well done the way they did that. I mean, I felt sorry for Leviathan, but he felt, because he's failing in this horribly dramatic way, but it did help his character too. Yeah. But it really showed you why this person is in charge, why this character is in charge. And these were good stories. They worked very, very well.
Of course. And then right after that first year, they switch over to a new storyline where he apparently is this absolutely horrible leader and making all these horrible decisions and alienating everybody. But of course, then it turns out that whole thing was a ruse in order to essentially trap the bad guy at the time, who was the UP president. So, or bad lady, I guess is the better way of putting that. So you kind of get a little bit of both from a actual, here's the real deal leader, here's the leader who's kind of being a little bit duplicitous in order to get the end result that he's looking for.
It was a bit of whiplash, and I remember reading those going like, what are they doing? And when the end reveal comes out, I kind of sat there and I said, I still think that's not what you want to see from a character like Cosmic Boy. Like, even with the motivation of I'm going to catch the bad guy, went against a lot of sort of what they had built in the first year.
And the way they kind of approached how he would react to certain things, it felt like he was overdoing it, to put it bluntly, even when he knew what the ruse was the whole time, which I guess, he's trying to play the part of the horrible leader. But yeah, it was kind of strange. It was a little bit even though I love that overall storyline with President Chu, it was a little bit dissonant, I guess, from what we had just seen.
Yeah, I mean, he's never been a character who you would put as duplicitous at all. Like he just doesn't have that in him, and it's very much a direct. So it was a weird thing. But then, I mean, that was sort of my one big criticism when we talk about Cosmic Boy in the post Zero Hour era, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about when it's Wade and Pyre and McCraw, or whether we're talking about it's Abnett and Lanning, is Cosmic Boy either became like this really vanilla, boring, like I don't have any emotions and I will always do what's best for the team, or they would just kind of ignore him. Like I think of one of the craziest storylines that they did, which was when he's actually in a coma and Saturn Girl takes control of his body and then ends up almost marrying him, even though he's not aware of what's going on. And then when he finally recovers and he's got everything back, they tell him, here's what happened. His response was just, okay, cool. Like, no big deal.
Yeah.
And then I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And I think he kind of became too much of like, they just took away all emotion from him. He just became this, you have to be the good guy. And you're the good guy in these scenes. It kind of lost it for me. Please tell me you're wrong. Please tell me why I'm wrong on this.
No, I mean, I don't think that you are. I mean, and honestly, I think at the root of all of that, right, was this weird thing that they had been playing with ever since the Legionnaires title started, when it was still in the original continuity. And they had the whole thing of, hey, Garth is really being kind of a big asshole, and why don't we get Rokk and Imra together, right? Or hinted that possibility, and then they started running with it again at the beginning of the reboot, and then it kind of turned into this, right? I think this was the ultimate destination of that choice, and it didn't really, even though we've had this discussion before about around Saturn Girl about is it really effective to change who she has affection for, meaning romantic affection for, when it's a new continuity versus the old continuity. And I think it's fine to do that, I guess, or to play with it, but it's still weird. It doesn't fit right in a lot of cases. And then when you have a situation where it's written to be a little bit more natural, like it kind of was at the beginning of the reboot, honestly, and then change horses mid-stride, the whole thing seems like it wasn't really handled very well, or handled very smoothly at the very least. But you're right. You want to show, not tell, as much as you can from a writing perspective. And I think it was just a lot of, no, we're just telling you this is the way it's going to be.
They did a great job, and I don't know if they were trying to do this, building up a Rokk Imra romance at the beginning of Post Zero Hour. I think they were trying to build the triangle. The problem with what they did, and I mean, we're getting a little off the Cosmic Boy stuff, is like you say, they wrote Lightning Lad so badly, or sorry, Livewire at this point, so badly that every reader is like, well, no, these two should be together and Garth should be on his own. Like, there's no way that this doesn't make any sense. And I mean, that's a bigger problem that I have with the Post Zero Hour reboot, is that so much of it was like, remember what they did in the Silver Age? That's gospel, that's the law, and we'll throw some stuff to maybe throw a wrench in it or two, but we know we're always going to go back to that, even though it doesn't make sense. Which then, of course, leads me to why didn't they do anything with Night Girl? Because when we're talking about Cosmic Boy relationships, like she's the center of Silver Age, Bronze Age, 5 years later. They were a couple almost as long as anybody else has been.
Oh, for sure. And so while we're talking about Lita Jath, who is Night Girl, let's just spend a couple of minutes just talking about her, because just the fact of how they became a couple, a little bit weird. Just going to say that right now.
Well, remember how I said it when we were talking about the Silver Age? It seemed like every Silver Age romance was the girl going, hey, I think you're cute, and the guy going, okay. And it was, like the whole background, if you're reading those early Silver Ages, like she wants to be a Legionnaire solely to meet Cosmic Boy,
right?
And that's it. And so you're like, okay, so she's a stalker? Is that where we're going? But it's the 60s, so it's fine. You're writing for a bunch of 8-year-old boys who are like, is that how you get a girlfriend? So it is what it is, right? But I think by when would I say that relationship started to kind of, I don't even want to say make sense, but I mean, yeah, by Bronze
Yeah,
Age, by
for
the
sure.
70s, you're seeing them together.
Yep.
And then, like you say, like that Cosmic Boy miniseries that we will talk about next episode. So please subscribe and check in. Uh, she's a very important character. Like they're essentially a married couple by that point, even though they're not really married.
Yep.
But
Yep. Yep. So what other, so while we're still on the subject of the post Zero Hour era, what other stories kind of hit it for you from a Cosmic Boy perspective? Because we're only from the point of the reboot, you know, we've only maybe gotten halfway through the whole reboot time period.
I would say I'm going to go a little bit further ahead. I did really enjoy the way they wrote him in the Legion, the Abnett and Lanning. I thought he, and especially when Kid Quantum became the leader. Forget about we'll talk about the romantic part there too. But he was the supportive, like, no, you're the leader. I'm going to step back, but I'm still going to help you. And I thought it was really well done. I really liked what they did with
The
that.
Legion Emeritus role, basically, or the Leader Emeritus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, so while we're talking about the Abnett and Lanning era, right? So there was the actual Legion time frame, which is what you're talking about there. But just prior to that, in between Legion Lost and the Legion, there was the Legion Worlds miniseries, and the third issue was a focus on the world of Brawl. And in this particular world, or this time frame, the Legion has basically been disbanded because the Legion is off and lost somewhere, and or at least half of them, and then those who are left behind are basically just off to fend for themselves. And so this whole storyline takes place on Brawl, where effectively Cosmic Boy is there to steal a super secret star drive, and he's put in a direct confrontation with the other Brawlian legionnaire or ex-legionnaire named Magno, who has lost his powers, kind of in an echo of 5 years later. And so there's some interesting moments there where they really kind of focus on Rokk's dedication to the concept of the Legion, and the fact that they're basically getting the band back together, but they're not really talking about getting the band back together at that point, because at the end of that story, you see Rokk back with a lot of other Legionnaires like Triad and Shrinking Violet and things like that. But it's really about him being dedicated to the concept of what the Legion really is, what it stands for, and how they can reform it into the kind of dystopia that the United Planets has turned into after the events of the Legion Lost kickoff.
So just as you're mentioning this, I was actually thinking, this is a bizarre aside and I apologize. So during post Zero Hour, so for that whole run, how many different female Legionnaires had crushes on Cosmic Boy? Because you had Saturn Girl, you could say XS, Triad, maybe a little bit,
maybe a little bit,
Shrinking Violet, maybe a little.
Yeah, maybe.
Like he was kind of written as like the guy, and that was the thing. They kind of elevated him to this, like, here's this big star, and it just kind of came to me because I always thought like when you're mentioning Legion Worlds, I thought it would have been a great little side thing to throw in and have him, like, because I remember reading that going, why is Shrinking Violet here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. They'd never shown a connection between the two of them before that, and I thought it would have been a really interesting way to kind of move forward of the two leaders of in Legion history, right?
Well, I have a thought on that actually. That since you mentioned it, because it's a great point. My personal thought on that was that the folks who were working with Rokk in that scenario they tended to have the same vested interest in the concept of Legion itself, right? I think that at the very end, right, when there's actually a scene in Legion Worlds where they say, yeah, it's at the very end, and the survivors are basically saying, what are we going to do now there's no Legion? And I think the people who were left behind that worked with Rokk were folks who were still dedicated to that concept, or the writers decided that they were the ones who had dedication to the concept, and they're the ones who wanted to keep it moving. And so I think they were just with Rokk out of a sense of duty, honestly. I think it's just as easy as that.
could be, and it could be as well. Just the Rokk says something, and Triad has nowhere to go. Right, like without the Legion, she's a woman without a planet, right?
Yeah, I thought
follows.
exactly that's why Shrinking Violet was there. Or Violet, I guess, if we should say.
No, that makes sense. And then Chuck, of course, is there because Triad's there. So that's the simple one. So
yeah, actually, let me look.
Good.
So it's Invisible Kid, it's Violet, it's Chuck, and actually that's it. I guess Triad is still at back on Earth handling the affairs of the.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've completely misremembered that. Yeah, because she's running Brand's company.
So it's Lyle and Vi and Chuck.
The joys of all of these different reboots merging together in your brain. You're like, wait, is it her? Is it this? What's going on? And then, of course, being old, that also hurts as well.
Exactly.
That's good. The only other thing to talk about with Cosmic Boy, I think, is how they handled him in the 3-boot when Wade and Kitson rebooted the book as well. And we thought they pushed him as the greatest leader ever in post Zero Hour. 3-boot kind of took it to the next level. And I know it wasn't Wade who wrote this, but I mean, at the very end, they literally have people come back. Was it 1,000 years in the future? So like from the 41st century, and they go back and they say, "You're the greatest leader ever. Come lead our team." And he's so pissed at the Legion. He's like, "Yep, see you later," and he's gone. And then in one of the most insane things I've ever seen, then they do like a 4-issue search for Cosmic Boy, and they never find him. And okay, what was the point? But yeah, it was. I thought they gave him a few more feet of clay in this one, and he made some mistakes and he did some bad things. He got some great speeches with Wade, but yeah, it was a lot of that whole run. If you like Cosmic Boy, he's the central figure for the. I mean, when did he leave? Like 40?
No, it was issue 30
somewhere
actually.
in there?
Okay,
sorry. Yeah, I'm jumping way ahead. Okay. So you get a good 2 year. I mean, yeah, you get to 29. Yeah, 2.5 years. So he's just constantly fighting with Brainiac 5 over the control of the Legion, and they don't do a good job of making you think Brainiac 5 would be better in charge. So you end up just going, yeah, Cosmic Boy is the best leader, and it kind of just stops there because Brainiac 5 is written as a complete sociopath. So it's not hard to get on Rock's side on that one.
Yeah. The Knights Tempest come and pick him up in issue 30, and then we never see him for the rest of the 3-boot. And it probably, thank God, he's probably better off for that. So,
well, I mean, that was my running joke during 5 Years Later. Is the best thing that could have happened to Phantom Girl was she got shot 1,000 years into the past and had nothing to do with that series. So there was that. Okay, there's one other story, and I've already told you about this one. This is my craziest Cosmic Boy story ever. I wanted to bring this up. So if you're going back through the years, this is a Bronze Age story. It's Superboy 215. I think it was supposed to be this great heroic tale for Cosmic Boy, and it ends up being alternately his best and worst story of the 1970s. Okay, so the premise of the story is this. Cosmic Boy can't use his powers for one day because there is a Brawlian tradition where nobody uses their powers, right? And at the same time, that day, the Emerald Empress has captured a bunch of Legionnaires and is threatening to kill them. So Cosmic Boy can't go and help. He can't use his powers until Lightlass basically goes in, yells at him, and he changes his mind. He gets onto a ship, he flies off, but he's still not using his powers. He just has his flight ring. That's it. He flies into battle, saves the day, but gets blasted by the Emerald Empress and is close to death. And is going to die, but the team makes a deal with the Emerald Empress. She saves him. She flies off. End of story. So you would think, awesome story for Cosmic Boy. Like, he's a hero. He doesn't need his powers. This is how brave he is. The problem with the story is that, first, on a smaller note, it's the very first issue, the very first story that features Cosmic Boy's 70s costume. I don't even know how to describe this aside from like the worst bathing suit ever. So if you've never seen this, get onto Google and type in Cosmic Boy 70s. So he's naked. So he's wearing shorts. That's there. His chest piece is basically these two pieces of fabric that go up to essentially his nipples. Cover those. and his shoulders are bare, his arms are bare, and there's a strip down the middle of his chest that's bare. It is. I mean, there was always the joke that Mike Grell made the Legionnaires as naked as he could possibly make them for a kid's book. This is that, and it's considered one of the worst costumes in Legion history. But then, two, even worse, when Lightlass is challenging Cosmic Boy and saying, like, how dare you not go save your teammates? How dare you not go rescue them? In his frustration, Cosmic Boy open hand slaps her across the face. Now, I guess in 1974, that was that's still bad. I mean, but it's 1974. But nowadays, you read that and you're like, what the crap?
Yeah, there's a lot of slapping of Legionnaires around that time period too.
Yeah, and I mean, I sit there and I read this, and there's no mystery of this. He just open hand, smacks her, and yet somehow he's okay and he's the good guy, but Sunboy's the jerk because he has one issue where he has space madness, and that destroyed his character for 30 years. I would just say, take a read. Like it's a crazy, crazy story. It's in, I don't know which omnibus it is. The second one, third one.
I can't remember specifically which one that is actually, because it's the that's when we get into the Bronze Age, right?
It is. So it's full, like Jim Shooter's writing it, and it's his second run on the Legion. Mike Grell's the artist, and he's still pretty early in his run.
It may actually be one that's not collected. If it's collected in anything, it's in those old archives from the 90s. Is probably the only place.
I think it's archive 12 or 11 or 12, something like that. So yeah, it's the craziest Cosmic Boy story that is out there. And it's a really rough read now. Like, especially she kind of does nothing aside from, hey, go save your teammates.
All I have to say about the Cosmic Boy costume of that era is that I guess Mike Grell is basically the Jose Fernandez of the Legion. And if you don't know who Jose Fernandez is, all you have to think about is Batman Forever and the nippled batsuit. So that's where that comes from.
Whereas I hear Jose Fernandez and I think, oh, pitcher who passed away. So I'm glad you explained that. Same story is when Colosso Boy gets a new costume, which I think might be his worst costume as well. Like, it's a double-edged sword of what were they thinking? But it's it's part of continuity. It's there. All right. The last one, because we're getting close to our time. I always like to ask this question when we talk about Legionnaires and we get into these focus. For a reboot, and we know there's a new Legion title coming up, what would you like to see them do with Cosmic Boy moving forward?
Honestly, I just would like to see, and I would like to see Cosmic Boy and Lita as a couple, and I would just honestly, I just like to see Rokk Krinn as a solid leader, whether he's the actual leader in title or not. I just want to see a stable guy who is a natural leader to his team that knows what he's doing. Like I said when we were talking about I guess the Saturn Girl episode, I think I called Rokk Krinn, his name is apt because he's a solid foundation for the Legion, right? He's a rock. And that's how I think his personality should be. He should be steady, he should be solid. And he's kind of a no drama kind of guy is what I'm thinking, right? That may make him a little bit boring from a drama perspective, but as we've seen from a lot of the examples that we were talking about today, you can still have a solid guy, solid character who doesn't have who's not very histrionic or emotional or anything like that, but still have solid stories and have drama happen to them and have them react accordingly. How about you?
So interesting that you said with Night Girl. I'm okay with him with in a different romantic relationship. I want them to lean into the pro athlete side of him, and I don't think they've ever done it. Like, I was thinking, he should be the LeBron James of the Legion, like, for both good and bad. Like, a guy who's been sorry.
I mean, I kind of think they did. They did lean into that in the reboot, because a lot of the there's several stories around his manager, right, being kind of this villain who's causing problems, and he goes back for a couple of I guess charity games, if you want to call it that, right? There's that Titan Brawl charity Magno Ball game, stuff like that. So they did lean into it a bit, but I mean, I guess you're talking about even more.
I'm not talking about like that sort of off the court, like on the court stuff. I'm talking about like the personality. So I'll give you a couple of
Oh, okay.
examples. Like I don't want them to write him. I'm just going to keep using basketball references because it's the easiest one. I don't want him like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, where they're psychopaths and they only care about winning. But the reason why I picked LeBron James is historically he's always been somebody who's always helped his teammates, but has also for his entire life had to deal with being the most famous person in a room. And so here's a guy who they, and they did this with Post Zero Hour, where he's the greatest Magno Ball player ever. There should be something that goes with that, where like he's got this sort of extra gravitas to him, where like because people know who he is, and to the same degree, there is a certain personality of being that sports leader that I'd like to see them lean into a little bit more. I would also like to see him having to deal with the stress of he's going from being the best he is at what he does to being, as soon as you put, say, Ultra Boy or Monel on this team, he's no longer the most powerful. He's no longer the best. How does he deal with going from I'm the best I am at what I do to now I'm just, I mean, depending on where you want to put his power levels, mid, a little bit higher than mid. And I think that's an interesting thing for him to deal with that just gets a little bit more drama there. Like one thing I have noticed, sorry.
Well, wouldn't I was just gonna say, wouldn't you say that that was addressed in the Bendis version? Because he has a little bit of a crisis of faith, and is a little he's a little bit that this is one of the not what am I trying to say here? This is one of the instances where Cosmic Boy is not portrayed very well, in my opinion, right? Because he's a little bit petulant about that kind of scenario, right? I can't remember. I think maybe Ultra Boy is voted leader, and he is kind of all upset about it, right? And I think he even has a talking to with it from his dad or something like that, right? And it's a little bit of a weird scenario for somebody who's a Cosmic Boy fan, right? But it's something that actually happens.
Right,
So
but is
yeah,
that, I mean,
I'm actually pulling up. This is issue number 8 of the Bendis run. Actually,
yeah, and my argument with that is that was that a because he felt because he was suddenly like underpowered compared to everybody, or was that just this is a character flaw that Bendis has given him? Whereas like I don't know. I just think there's ways they can do this that can make the character more interesting. Like if he's, and I think he can still be the leader, but like I say, like to kind of, again, to go back to the LeBron James metaphor, he's the leader of the team and he's always been the best player on the team at the same time. I mean, there's only maybe 3 or 4 years in LeBron James' career where you can say he's not the best player on his team. And then that it's kind of that, I think it would be just an interesting way to handle, and he doesn't have to be whiny and complaining about it. He just has to change the way he views things. And it could show some great character growth as well. To the same degree, how does the other Legionnaires handle it when he's the most famous person walking in? And then you could have some fun with, like, I don't think Ultra Boy would handle that well, or I don't think, I think there's just different ways you could go with this. I just think it's one of those things where I don't know if they've, the joke that I always go with is they've never had somebody who understands athletics writing an athlete.
yeah, okay,
If that makes sense. And you,
yeah, no, absolutely,
yeah. And I think just to have that to kind of say like, hey, there's a part of this character that we just haven't approached yet. It's the same, like, when we talk about every character, there's these little aspects, we said this with Saturn Girl, like we'd love to see them have these different takes that would be, that maybe they haven't gone with yet, that don't ruin the character, but just give us a more well-rounded person. I mean, again, the problem with Legion is when you've got 22 members, or as I mentioned before we started recording, in the Legion of Superheroes movie, when I think they had like 60, and it's like, how do you write?
They literally had everybody there, even people who weren't traditional Legionnaires.
Yeah, like how do you write all these characters? And I think this would just be a nice. It's what I'd like to see. I'll just put it that way. And so it would be a nice. It would be a nice change. Anyways, we have hit time. We don't want to go any longer It's funny, when we first started this podcast, we were thinking 30 minutes and we'll be good. And now it's like 60 minutes and that's what we're hitting. So we hope
That'll be good.
we hope that we're hitting 2 drives on your commute. That's because if this is one commute, I feel sorry for you. I will say this. So we already kind of referenced it earlier. I will repeat it again. Next episode, we're going to look at the Cosmic Boy miniseries. We're going to talk a lot about kind of what led up to it, and we will talk a lot about the Legends miniseries too. That's coming next.
Well, actually, before we go, right, we got some mail. We have a mailbag today. We did get an email. So our email, when you want to contact us directly, we are at longlivethelegion2025@gmail.com. And you can send us an email just like Mike Brink did a couple weeks ago. And Mike says, Jim and Jay, a friend and fellow Legion fan recommended your podcast to me, and I'm so glad he did. And so are we, and thank you to Mike's friend. Your first 4 episodes have been most enjoyable, and I look forward to more. The Universo project and a double discussion of Saturn Girl were a great place to start. While I'm admittedly not a huge Imra fan, your discussion really elevated the character for me. My favorite character is Timberwolf, followed closely by Element Lad and Projectra. I love some of the era-specific members like XS, Gates, Devlin Orion, Monstrous, and Kono. Topic suggestion: what are 10 essential characteristics of the Legion? Take care and keep up the great work. So thanks, Mike. We really appreciate your email here. And again, thank you for the topic suggestion. So anybody else who's listening, if you have a topic suggestion that you'd like us to take a look at and consider for an episode, and we'll probably do it, give us an email. So again, our email is longlivethelegion2025@gmail.com. We love hearing from you, and we love hearing the response from you guys out there. It's really humbling to get these emails, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for listening. It really means a lot. In the meantime, if you wanted to get in touch with me or find out what I'm doing, I have my Legion reviews at jimboslegion.blogspot.com, and I try to do one comic a week that is took this week off because I'm watching the Master Tournament, so that's kind of been taking up my time. But you can also find me personally on Blue Sky at jimbofett.bsky.social, Reddit at JimboFett87, and on Discord as JimboFett on the Legion fan club server. And if you would like to get on the Legion fan club server, feel free to reach out. We will get you on there. Where can we find you, Jay?
You can find me on if you're looking for the columns, and I do weekly columns where I reread 2 old issues and leave my thoughts. You can find me on at longlivethelegion.blogspot.com, or just go to the Legion of Superheroes page on Reddit. We've always linked stuff there as well. So if you're a Reddit user, you can find everything there. And on Reddit, I go by the name Drake Burrows, which tells everybody who my favorite Legionnaire is. And that's actually how you can find me on Discord too. If you're on Blue Sky, I am at jmckernan.bsky.social. That's it.
All right. And again, so if you want to reach us and send us some email and tell us what you think, you can send it to us at longlivethelegion2025@gmail.com. You can also reach us on our Blue Sky website as well, which is longlivethelegion.bsky.social.
Perfect. Well, that wraps us up for this week. We hope to see you in a couple of weeks. You mentioned this before, Jim, and I'm just going to repeat this. We are so thankful for everybody who's listening to this. When we decided to do a podcast, and I don't think I'm just speaking for myself, we were not expecting the numbers that we're getting right now. So everybody who's choosing to listen in, it really makes us feel great. We're glad that we can reach Legion fans, and judging from the statistics, from all around the world, which is another amazing thing to see as well, that the Legion isn't just a US and Canada thing. Although I will say personally, I'd like to see a few more Canadians on here. So if you have Canadian friends, please recommend this podcast. There's I think 3 or 4 of us, and we're like, hey, welcome to Canada. So aside from that, we're going to call it a day. So the last thing we say at the end of every episode, long live the Legion.
Long live the Legion.